Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode here of the EdUp Experience. I got to tell you, and I open up, as you know, if you've been listening, every episode with some reflection. Reflection I have today is just the amazing spectrum of individuals that I get to talk to. I mean, the amount of episodes that I've been able to do and record, and Elvin has produced almost 1,200 episodes, and the sheer diversity of opinion and thought and perspective is what higher education really is all about. And be able to bring another leader to this podcast today that represents another critical viewpoint of what's happening in and around higher education today is such a blessing as we move forward to really create meaningful, positive content that lives in higher education through the voices of those doing the work. And this man's doing work. He is doing serious work. Ladies and gentlemen, let me get him on the mic right now. He is Elder Gilbert. He is the Commissioner of Higher Education for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Elder Gilbert, welcome to the EdUp Mic. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
I'm glad you're here. And, I think what we do with our audience all of the time is level set for us. You're the Commissioner of Education for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What does that mean? Give us an idea of scope, what you oversee, and sort of get us up to speed on your position and what you do.
Block out your calendar, bring your team, and lock in your spot, because Insights EDU early bird pricing ends December 15th. We'll see you in Fort Lauderdale, February 17th to the 19th, 2026. For 3 days, that will disrupt what you think you know about marketing and enrollment for today's modern learner. Support the EdUp Experience for just $5.99 a month and lock in that rate for life. You'll get ad-free early access to episodes. But hurry, price goes up after December 31st, 2025. Visit edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and click support the show.
Thank you. Yes, I've been in higher education almost my entire career. And I did my undergraduate at BYU, did a master's degree at Stanford, my doctoral work at the Harvard Business School, later joined the faculty there. And then at the invitation of the church was asked to leave Boston and became the president of BYU Idaho, then the president of BYU Pathway. And now I oversee all of the church's educational system. And we have 5 higher education entities. Our flagship is BYU, with about almost 40,000 students. BYU Idaho is a teaching-focused institution with a similar enrollment size. We have a college in Hawaii, BYU Hawaii, that focuses on Asia and the Pacific. We have a community college in Salt Lake City called Ensign College. And then we have BYU Pathway Worldwide, which serves almost 90,000 students all over the world with low-cost, affordable education. My assignment is to be the interface between the Church Board of Education and the university presidents. We have in the higher education system over 160,000 students in our university programs. We have another 450,000 students who take religion courses at public and private secular universities all across the world. And I oversee those programs, and it's been an amazing responsibility. And for us in the church, education's really serious. We know socially it's good to create self-reliance, civic engagement, the ability to earn a job and provide for a family. But for us, it's even deeper. Our recently passed president of the church, Russell M. Nelson, said that education for members of our church is a religious responsibility. So it has very deep significance, and the church invests significantly. It's been noted the church provides over $1 billion a year in humanitarian aid around the world, but it also provides $1 billion a year to help educate people from all walks of life, from the national merit finalists to the uh, first generation low income family in West Africa. And that's my responsibility, is to kind of oversee those investments by the church across the world.
Yeah, I mean, so not that much responsibility is what you're saying then.
I do report to a board, so I have good governance.
Oh, okay. So, and by the way, you did say it was an
Amazing
responsibility. And just to double down on that, so you're in the squeeze. It's sort of a squeeze. The board of education for the church and then university presidents all trying to do something. It's a good squeeze, right? I mean, you're getting to oversee amazing educational institutions, programs, religiously religious programs, and so on. And then you have a board of education who has vision. They have vision and what they want to accomplish through vision, through the religion, and you have to be the one that communicates that vision from the board to the presidents and ensures that it's being executed upon. Give us a little bit of how that squeeze plays out.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Joe, because the history of higher education, everyone was religious. All school, Harvard University, Yale University started out as religious schools. And the history is largely being one of the secularization of higher ed and the lightening of the role of religion in higher ed. Interestingly, in the last 20 years, enrollment in religious universities is far outpacing the enrollment in the academy more generally. And so you might ask, well, what's going on? I thought American youth were becoming less religious, but I think something's happening where Gen Z and even the younger generation coming up are saying, hey, the world's crazy right now. It's polarized, it's angry, um, and higher ed's been failing them. In a world of promoting academic freedom, sometimes this has come at the cost of having any moral clarity. And so some of my colleagues, even not in our schools, like Rabbi Berman at Yeshiva University, seen a record number of applications the last 5 years of people who aren't Jewish who just want to go to a school where there's some moral clarity. And we're seeing growth in Christian universities. And certainly from 2020 to today, our higher education system has more than doubled in enrollment. And so young people are looking for something different than just a secular education and something more. And one of my roles is to help us have excellence in our pedagogical endeavors, in our curriculum development, in our job placement, in our graduation rates, while also making sure from a board perspective that the investment of the church is helping build the character and moral integrity of a younger generation. And that's really a lot of what I do is mentoring the presidents and the universities around things that we would all hope people in higher education are deeply committed to. But I also try to draw down a religious and a spiritual motivation that should say, look, all of us care about retention and graduation rates, right? All of us who got into this field, we care about first generation college students.
Yep.
But for us, the spiritual mission deepens that in a way that makes it even more substantive and frankly puts a responsibility on all of our religious educators and administrators to be excellent at what we do.
Is in your role and responsibility and stature as an elder, Are you helping to ensure that an initiative that's coming out of one of your higher institutions has the connection to your faith?
Yeah.
And sometimes does it not? And you have to go, okay, wait a minute. It's not as clear here as it needs to be on how, get the tactics, got it,
Yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
but how are we couching that within our belief?
No, absolutely. In fact, I wrote an article a few years ago in Deseret magazine called "The Courage to Be Different," and we used as a visual Memorial Chapel at Harvard University and how it faces Widener Library. And people used to describe that as the face-off between faith and reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go study even when I was a doctoral student in both places, Widener Library and Memorial Chapel. And I used to reflect that this was never a face-off for me. Faith and reason were never competing dichotomies. They were always integrated. That the more I was committed to my faith, the deeper and more thoughtful I could be in my intellectual and scholarly pursuits. And one of the things we try to help our faculty and then our students realize is that there is a fundamental connection between these things. They aren't modular or compartmentalized, but they can be mutually reinforcing. And I even for me, Joe, I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was a religious minority. I always was a little different because of my beliefs. And I got to BYU as an undergraduate freshman. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I fit.
Hmm.
And look, I wasn't going to spend my whole life surrounded by only people of my faith. And the motto of BYU is enter to learn, go forth to serve. And I've lived in Tokyo and San Francisco, LA, and Boston. Most of my life, I've been that religious minority. But for a season, there was a strengthening that happened amongst our people. And that was so defining for the rest of my life. And that sense of spiritual stewardship shaped my professional career. It shaped how I pursued my scholarly pursuits at Stanford and Harvard. And eventually it brought me back to the church. But if I had never come back to a church responsibility, I would have always integrated my faith and my professional pursuits in ways that were reinforcing. And we try to help our students do the same. They may be becoming an accountant or a physicist or a psychologist, but we try to do that same thing. And there's a wonderful essay by C.S. Lewis on the eve of World War II. And all of these British students headed off to college were saying, well, what do we do? Do we go to college or should we just sign up for the army? Because they could see Hitler was on the march and it was the eve of war. And C.S. Lewis never answered the question, but in a speech in Oxford Chapel, he said, life is the same way. And if life is a battle between good and evil, shouldn't we all become seminarians? And his answer was emphatically no. God wants great plumbers, accountants, attorneys. And, we try to help people see you can serve God by being excellent at what you do and doing it in wonderful and caring ways. And that's really a core part of our commitment to education in the church.
Epic.
Let's take this in a little bit of a different direction. There are, if you hear the word traditionalism,
Yeah.
there are two things that can come to people's minds. One is religion and the other is higher education.
Yeah.
And we're deeply rooted as an industry in traditionalism. To your point, many, or if not most institutions, when they started, had a religious affiliation and so on. And then you as we move forward in this world where the model of higher education and the business model is being challenged, and our relevance, the relevance of higher education to students across the world, whether it's worth it or not, and you go, probably the most unlikely institutions to change and innovate are those that are both religiously affiliated and in higher education. And then
it's a double whammy.
And then What happens? 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago now, or a year, I interviewed this gentleman, Dr. Bruce Cush, who comes on to tell me about this innovation that he, at his school, Ensign College and BYU Pathway Worldwide, had created and released the first 90 credit bachelor degree. And you went, well, wait a minute. Out of higher ed, religiously affiliated institution, they put forward the first innovation at the 90 credit bachelor's, not a 3-year bachelor's. There's a very big difference in my mind between taking a bachelor's degree in 3 years and taking 90 credit bachelor's degree.
Huge difference.
And you go, wait a minute, you've innovated, you've set the pace, you've blazed a trail. Why is it wrong to assume that a religiously affiliated institution in higher education can't innovate?
It is, in fact, not only is it wrong, when I speak to our own presidents, President Cush and all of our presidents in the BYU system, or whether I'm speaking to the American Council on Education's Commission on Faith-Based Universities that I co-chair, I say, if you think your religious mission buys you protection from being responsive to the market and adapting, you have a fundamental disconnect with what religious mission is in the first place. And for us, Joe, I really see, like, we at the core, why are we doing this in the first place? We believe that our students are sons and daughters of God. They have divine potential, and we need to help them realize that potential. And if our traditional ways get in the way of that, then we are failing on our religious mission.
That
we
is
are
such
absolutely
a good way
failing
to think about it.
on
That's
our
such a
religious
good way.
mission.
Yeah. That's a good way to
So
think about
you brought up the 90 credit bachelor's degree, but Joe, I could go. BYU Idaho gets created out of a community college.
Yeah.
And people look at BYU Pathway. BYU Pathway is a low cost online bachelor's degree that's high quality, unlike a lot of universities who've used online to prop up old, expensive business models on campuses. We lowered the cost of our online program to the student's ability to pay. We literally lowered it to the variable cost of an additional student. So you can get a bachelor's degree in the United States through BYU Pathway for $7,500.
What? Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
You can get a bachelor's degree through BYU Pathway for $7,500. And by the way, that's not subsidized by the church. At least on a variable cost basis,
right?
We brought the cost structure down. It drives me batty when I hear people say, we're committed to affordable education. Therefore, we're going to raise $1 billion endowment to subsidize our broken cost model, right? And I'm like, you're not committed to affordable education. You're committed to subsidized education.
That's right.
And for us, we said, what drives costs in higher ed? Is there a way that we can get the cost down so we can take this to students all over the world? So at least the church does subsidize the fixed costs of the program, like the president, the administration, those fixed costs. But on a variable cost basis, we brought the variable cost down so that we could get a 7,500 bachelor's degree that doesn't require perpetual subsidies. And
that's an innovation.
That is a fundamental change. And by the way, most universities, and I'm not trying to be critical, but this is a critical commentary. Most universities have used higher. Look at the price of online programs at most universities. I will not name them, but if you just did the analysis, it costs more to go through their online program than to come to campus.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. And in the church, our religious mission said, how can we use this to bring education to people who didn't think they could do it, didn't think they could afford it? We're going to design it so they build confidence and then price it so they can graduate in a reasonable time frame at a low cost. But I mean, we could spend the whole show. That's BYU Pathway.
Yep.
And a lot of people praise BYU Pathway for being so innovative. I actually think our most innovative program in the church educational system is the most simple. It's not complicated, but if the measure is on cutting edge, complicated, breakthrough technology and innovation, BYU Idaho doesn't meet that. But if the measure is it breaks the model of traditional higher education, BYU Pathway was created by the president of our church in a 7-paragraph announcement. In 7 paragraphs, he laid out the most innovative, at least measured on how different it was than the rest of higher ed. He said it would be teaching focused. The faculty would not be hired to do research and scholarship, but be hired on their ability to be excellent teachers. It would have a year-round calendar. If you look at the 3 drivers of cost in higher ed, it's faculty salaries, physical infrastructure, and research.
Yep.
Well, he went to a year-round calendar, which added a 50% utilization improvement to faculty. The year-round calendar meant that you got a 50% improvement in your cost per physical space. And we said, we aren't doing research. We're just going to focus on the students. Then we eliminated college sports and graduate programs and said, our only cost will be to undergraduate teaching education. And BYU Idaho grew from its announcement in 2000 with 10,000 students to today almost 40,000 students.
Amazing.
And the inflation adjusted cost to the church has actually declined. I want you to think about from 10,000 to 40,000 students, and the actual inflation adjusted cost declined because of a year-round calendar, a teaching-focused faculty. It's not a complicated model. Anyone could do this unless you were trapped by the traditional model of higher ed.
And there you have it. That's called a mic drop moment there, Elder Gilbert, because that is fundamentally the problem. We all know in higher education that, I do a lot of keynote speaking, and I do this section on common sense. And I say there's some things that don't make a lot of sense. For example, 9-month faculty that have any decision-making power over a student journey. Because what will happen, and you know this, is it's June, that faculty's on vacation, and somebody says, well, we can't evaluate this transcript, this class for transcript credit because the faculty member who needs to weigh in is not available.
Yeah.
And you go, that doesn't make any common sense. That the agrarian calendar that we have, it makes sense for some institutions when they commit to that, and that's what they're going to do. But if you're going to serve a student who's mobile, adult, in different parts of the world, who needs flexibility and so on, just moving to a year-long calendar has so many fundamental operational benefits. And to your point, it's not hard to think about doing it. It's hard to get people on board.
If you and I had never been educated in the higher education system, if we had never worked for a university, and we are just saying, how would you design a university today? This is absolutely how you would design it.
Exactly.
And yet, BYU Pathway has some analogs, like ASU Online, Southern New Hampshire, Western Governors University. In my mind, BYU Idaho is one of one, and yet it's the most simple model to replicate of anything we do in our church educational system.
Hypothetically simple, of course.
Yeah.
And that brings up a really interesting point about when we're talking about innovation, when we're talking about this I don't know the right word, but combination of faith and education and its empowering force for the world. We do have technology that's rearing its ugly head now, or maybe depending on how you look at it, artificial intelligence. How do you as the commissioner think about artificial intelligence? It not only in the context of teaching and learning? Because I think when we talk about AI for higher ed, it's like this blanket statement. It means everything. It doesn't. It's AI for teaching and learning. There's artificial intelligence for business operations. There's AI for self efficiency.
Yeah.
How does the church think about AI for the long run for your institutions of higher
Thank
education?
you. It's interesting. You started the interview with how do I help create the interface between the church governance and the university presidents and faculty. In this case, we started with kind of some principles that had come to us from our church leaders. And one of the 12 apostles in the church gave a talk to all the young adults of the church saying, hey, embrace AI, use it for good, but don't ever let it take away your personal agency, and don't ever let it replace the principle of hard work. And then another leader formed a task force that he's working on with the Vatican right now, Elder Garrett Gong. And he was a former leader in the administration at BYU, a Rhodes Scholar, an Oxford PhD, just remarkable. And he's looking at how do we use AI in ways that don't prevent the human mind from continuing to be responsible for processing, but also speed up and accelerate work that we can do. And with those guideposts, then we've formed teams that are looking at AI's use in grading in the classroom, plagiarism, and all of those issues. We have a whole bunch of efforts. I just went through them this morning with my chief technology officer, looking at AI's use to lower costs and increase efficiency in tutoring, in student services, in identifying students at risk, and grading. So, we're simultaneously looking at the moral and ethical implications of this new technology while also embracing its capacity to help us serve more people more effectively at a lower cost.
Yeah, I mean that's just a perfect example because you're working both ends simultaneously. What are the ethical implications? How do we think about this as a church institution? How do we think about this for higher ed institutions? The policy, I it's funny because I talk about this so much, and my niece is in college and she's in her, I guess she would be in her first semester of her second year as a sophomore. And one of her comments last year to me was, I have 5 instructors, 5 faculty the last semester, and all 5 gave me a different use case for AI in their classroom. So I had to have 5 ways. One didn't want it that much. One wanted a little more. One wants this, one wants that. And you go, how does the student keep this straight?
Yeah.
We're having trouble getting it right at the highest level. And then students are coming in with this expectation and confusion around what's acceptable and what's not. Am I going to get in trouble and what's not?
Yeah.
That's a tough place to be for students right now, especially as they look to us to lead.
If you're afraid of success, go ahead and tune out because this segment is not for you. Every year, Higher Ed talks about change. But Insights EDU 2026, that's not another conference. It's the catalyst. It's where fresh data drops, revealing real insights on how modern learners are thinking, searching, and deciding right now. And here's a spoiler for higher ed leaders. Most institutions aren't keeping up. 3 days on the beach, February 17th to the 19th, 2026, in Fort Lauderdale. Over 65 powerhouse speakers, 40 sessions, zero fluff. We're talking unfiltered strategy, AI integrations, and forward thinking built for the leaders who want to disrupt before they're disrupted. So here's the question. Are you ready to lead transformation or be overtaken by it? Reserve your spot now at insightsedu.com. Early bird pricing ends December 15th. The EdUp experience has delivered over 1,000 episodes with higher ed leaders from around the world. Now you can support the show for just $5.99 a month and lock in that rate for life when you join before December 31st, 2025. You'll enjoy ad-free early access to episodes. Go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com. Click support the show and secure your lifetime rate today.
Yeah. And many students are going to be in professions where, from graphic design to forensic accounting, where if you don't learn to use AI, you aren't going to be effective. You're
Yeah.
going to be expected to use AI models to accelerate the work you're doing. And so we have to have, we don't want to sit back and say AI is all bad. We want them to use it. And it's interesting. In my prior life at the Harvard Business School, I studied with Clay Christensen and spent much of my career looking at disruptive innovation and how it would change industries. And there's always a sustaining application of a new technology, and there's a disruptive application. Sustaining applications help you do what you're already trying to do, just faster, better, quicker, cheaper. And I'm not actually worried about those. We'll learn how to do those because they make total sense.
Right.
Disruptive applications will let us do things we could never do, often for audiences we could never serve. And, it's interesting. AI is no different than the internet. It has both disruptive and sustaining applications. And, for us, we're organizing to quickly embrace the sustaining uses and then think more thoughtfully about how to just structure the disruptive uses. And, with the online learning was the same way. Online learning helped my universities be more efficient and serve their current students more effectively. But that was a sustaining application. But the disruptive application created BYU Pathway. And, today, almost 90,000 students around the world who will never come to one of these campuses are learning and getting a college degree because we looked at the disruptive implications in a separate way from the way we looked at the sustaining applications in our existing organizations.
Is that come from, do you have how is the top down or bottom up innovation application piece work? Do you have a forward thinking board of education who says, hey, look, this is the way we need to do it? Is it coming
Yeah.
up from the president saying, hey, this is what we're hearing from students?
It's both. But, institutions, Jim Collins said institutions are perfectly designed to get the results they get. And well-run institutions will pick up things that help them do what they're already designed to do better. And I'm not talking about lazy, arrogant, that's a different problem. How do we not be lazy? How do we be more humble? That's a different problem. But well-run organizations will ingest a disruptive technology pretty well, and they won't need a lot of help from me or our board. But well-run organizations will often reject and be threatened by a disruptive use of the same technology. And that often requires separate structure and organization. You could have never launched BYU Idaho inside of BYU.
Right.
BYU does scholarly work. It's one of the more national merit finalists than almost any college in the country, right? More than Harvard, more than Princeton. BYU is a big school,
Yeah.
so it has more students to find as national merit finalists. It has Fulbright scholars. It has research that's nationally recognized. It has a football team, but
yeah, a decently well-known football team, I would
yes,
say.
number 18 in the nation this week. So, but BYU Idaho, that simple innovation of year-round calendar, teaching track faculty, that would not have worked inside of BYU. And everyone at BYU Idaho thought, oh, we're so innovative, and Clay Christensen wrote a book about BYU Idaho called The Innovative University. When I became president, people were like, oh, we heard you guys are really innovative. I don't think they ever even read the book. But when a disruptive innovation like BYU Pathway came along, it was actually really hard for this innovative university to ingest into its systems because it was designed to do something else. And so we have really capable, committed people in our educational system, but we also try to look at it and say, what is each institution designed to do and what is it designed not to do? And one of my roles is when something disruptive comes along, is to find places where it can be protected and to find root it won't get killed by the existing ways of doing things.
So that the theory of disruptive innovation, and you know it better than I do, but this concept that if you have an innovation, you need to move it as far away from the mothership, so to speak, as possible, because the mothership, if you try to create that innovative force within what exists already, it's designed to kill it. It's designed
That's exactly
to eat it.
right.
It's designed to make sure that it doesn't happen, because the mothership sort of doesn't want to be disrupted. And that is, not only is it true, normally, it's true in higher education. I can give you hundreds of examples of where that's happened. Also, to me personally, when I've had to create something within a university, was innovative in it, and those that have been successful have said, okay, we're moving it over here. We're giving it a separate structure. We're giving it a separate mission. We're giving it a separate resources and tools, and they take off because the innovation is sort of unbound from being beholden to what exists.
Yeah, I won't go into great detail, but in my prior scholarly work, Clay Christensen and I, when I was still at the Harvard Business School, built a study of industries responding to disruptive innovation. And in our data set, we had, I don't know, it was 100 industries and 900 firms. The survival rate of successfully launching a disruptive innovation was 9%. So only 9% ever did it.
Yikes!
But of the 9%, 100% set it up as a structurally separate entity. There was no variance in the data.
Hard to argue against data like that.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that people won't use a given technology in sustaining ways. Online learning is helping campuses be more efficient. And I wrote a book called Dual Transformation with Scott Anthony, a managing partner at InnoSight. And we said, look, you have to have two transformation efforts here. One is for the legacy entity, and one is for the disruptive entity. And that was the dual transformation. Like, I need to use online learning to help drive the efficiency of this campus. But I also can use online learning to educate people who would never come here.
Yeah.
And so, when I finally realized you have to decouple these two things, we found ways to help with sustaining technology inside of existing organizations while doing very different things for very different student audiences in the disruptive entity. And that's what led to the growth of BYU Pathway.
Yeah, and you talk about growth, and I make sure I have these numbers right. At the beginning, you said 160,000 students in the university infrastructure that you have, and 450,000 students taking some type of religious course.
Yeah. So when I was a student at BYU, I had a spiritual education to complement my training in economics and international studies. When I went to Stanford and Harvard, I joined what was called an LDS institute, usually adjacent to a campus. And I had weekly spiritual classes there that complemented the secular learning I was doing. The 450,000 are in institutes, and we have these at ASU, at Harvard, at Stanford, at almost everywhere you go, internationally around the world. And that's, we say to our students, involve God in your learning, make him your partner. Whether you go to BYU or whether you go to ASU, make God part of your life. And ASU is not likely going to give you God in your life. So we provide these complementary classes. So, I look at my colleagues at other universities and I'm like, hey, I've got students in your university, thousands of them.
What are you talking about?
Thousands of them at ASU, at Harvard, at Princeton, at the University of Utah. And, sometimes even here in the state of Utah, I'll have Taylor Randall, who's my good friend, and he'll talk about us and them being BYU and Utah. And I'm like, hey, we're you. I got 4,000, 5,000 students in our institute up at the University of Utah. I've got 10,000 at Utah Valley University. And so
Wow.
no matter where LDS youth go to school, we try to complement their learning, make time for God in your life at this pivotal time. And so whether it's on our campuses are growing, but so are these religion classes that we offer in parallel to secular educational institutions all across the world.
I wanted to just restate that because when you, by the way, if it were me, and it's not, I'd be based at BYU Hawaii, but that's
Yes.
me. That's just me.
Well,
but-
and if you were, you wouldn't be wearing a black shirt, and I wouldn't be in a white suit. Our president there wears Hawaiian shirts and rides around campus on a skateboard.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. But I knew about the scope mostly of the BYU system, but not about that 450,000 really learners who are continual learning through your institute. You think about the scope of your impact. It's really incredible. So we like to conclude our episodes with two main questions, and I think this is just a good lead in. What else do you want to say about BYU? Is it the BYU system?
Yeah.
And what else do you want to say? Anything on your mind? Any thoughts that you're having? Open mic, take a couple minutes.
Great, thank you. First, I just say, we started this discussion earlier about how religious mission can drive the innovation imperative. We believe that deeply, and one of our church leaders has said, God is in relentless pursuit of his children. Joe, I stay up night worried all the time about retention and completion rates. And I know so many of my colleagues do. I mean, people don't get into higher education who don't care about young people. But I have this added responsibility of the spiritual concern for them. And, we care about our students because of who they are and who we believe they can become. And that is from BYU, and training up an undergrad student at BYU to head off to graduate school at Harvard or Oxford or wherever he goes, to, we have over 30,000 students in Africa in the BYU Pathway program. And no matter where I go in the world, we're unified by this care for individuals and concern for who they can become and helping them realize their God-given potential. In BYU Pathway, we often say, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. We care about helping students realize their potential. I worry in this country right now. I worry about the graduation rate in higher ed. I worry about first-year retention in higher ed. And we're doing all kinds of things to strengthen mentoring models, risk prediction, algorithms that find students who are struggling and design interventions. But on top of that, we believe we have an added responsibility and an added tool in the toolkit to help them know that someone else is there in their lives to help them. And that's why we do this. And it's a remarkable responsibility. I've spent almost my entire life in some university role or setting, and I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to do it in faith-based setting, because it allows me to help people see beyond their immediate circumstances and see their deeper potential spiritually. And that has made all the difference.
Yeah, so well said. And, in our society where right now, particularly where higher ed is being challenged by so many outside of higher ed that like to write or think about or tell us what's happening inside higher ed and actually don't know, but that disrupts the messaging to the masses. It's great to hear the passion and really the power of when these forces for good come together. how we can influence people to have better lives, to serve their neighbor better, to be better citizens. And that's the power of higher education at its core. And so happy to hear you talk about it that way.
If you're afraid of success, this message isn't for you. Every year, higher ed talks about change. But Insights EDU 2026, it's the catalyst. The Modern Learner Report drops here first, revealing how learners are thinking, searching, and deciding right now. Spoiler, most institutions aren't keeping up. 3 days on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, February 17th to the 19th, 2026. Over 65 powerhouse speakers, real strategy, real data, only built for leaders ready to own their transformation. Reserve your spot now at insightsedu.com. Early bird pricing ends December 15th. EdUp Experience has brought you powerful conversations with more than 400 college presidents and higher ed leaders, over 1,000 episodes and counting. Now, we're inviting you to join us in shaping the future of higher ed podcasting. For just $5.99 a month, you lock in that rate for life. But only if you sign up before December 31st, 2025. As a supporter, you'll get ad-free early access to episodes. Prices go up after December 31st, but your rate never will. Visit edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com. Click support the show and join our community today.
It is. And look, we are not the only people who care about young people.
Yep.
And religious people have that motivation, but I see so many amazing colleagues across higher ed. And, I think to my colleagues who aren't, faith-based or at least in institutions that are not, students desperately right now across the nation, religious or not, they want a feeling of belonging.
Yep.
And they want a feeling of purpose. And we cannot walk away from them. And I say to, secular presidents of universities all over the country, I say, hey, create safe spaces for people of faith. Jewish students through Hillel, or Catholic students through the Catholic student organizations, or our students through Institute, Christian students through Christian varsity programs. Allow that to be in their lives. Don't take that away from them. You don't have to endorse a specific religion. Just create spaces for them to be who they are. And then as a university president, even in a non-religious setting, find ways to talk about values and purpose and meaning. It's hard to do it right now in a polarized setting. It's easier for us, Joe, because we have in my institutions, we have a shared religious faith and community. But I'm praying for leaders who aren't of my faith, who aren't even in religious settings, that they'll have the courage to stand up and talk about purpose and meaning and service and pluralistic democracy in ways that are grounded and have character behind them. And we need it in this nation. And I know we're not going to have everyone come to BYU or BYU Pathway, but we need courageous leaders who are willing to have those conversations with their students and with their faculty.
I definitely cannot end the episode better than Elder Gilbert just did with what he said. So I'm just going to end it and say what an honor it was to have you here, Elder Gilbert, and representing a great message in higher education and the work that you're doing as commissioner across the BYU system. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you had fun too.
Oh, this was great. I love being with you, and I love the sound effects.
Oh, you know what? I got hundreds of them. I was being choosy. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Elder Gilbert. He is the Commissioner of Education for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you've just EdUp'd.